Some of the world's most incredible structures were built by people whose secrets died with them. These vanished builders left behind cathedrals, fortresses, and temples that modern science still cannot fully explain. This video will reveal how entire libraries of architectural genius were erased from history. You will discover why a 2,000-year-old concrete dome remains standing while our own modern versions crumble, and how ancient stonemasons cut rocks with a precision that baffles engineers today. How did an entire civilization's knowledge of construction simply disappear? By the end, you will see human history not as a steady march of progress, but as a story filled with profound and permanent losses. What does it say about our own civilization that we can no longer rebuild the wonders of the past? We are not talking about simple forgetfulness or the slow passage of time. A vanished builder represents something far more final and profound. These were not just people who lived and died, but entire systems of thought that ceased to exist. Think of a master stonemason who knew, by touch and by eye, exactly how to strike a block of granite to split it along a perfect, invisible plane, or the lead engineer of a cathedral who understood the precise counterweight needed for a spire that seemed to defy gravity itself. Their knowledge was not stored in books or on blueprints. It lived in their hands, in their practiced movements, and in the careful whispers shared with a trusted apprentice over a lifetime. This was a world of guilds and oral traditions where secrets were a form of currency and power. The sudden collapse of a civilization, a devastating plague that wiped out a generation of craftsmen, or the deliberate suppression of a craft by a new ruling class could sever that chain of knowledge in an instant. The result was not just the loss of a name, like the anonymous builders of the great Gothic cathedrals, but the complete erasure of a technical language. This is why our modern attempts to replicate their work so often fall short. We are trying to read a book where all the pages have been torn out, leaving only the magnificent, silent cover. The very existence of these structures challenges our most basic assumption that humanity is always moving forward, always improving. What if, in some crucial ways, we have been moving backward all along, unaware of the genius we left buried in the dust? High on a Peruvian mountainside, a fortress wall stands as a silent rebuke to our modern arrogance. The stones of Saxehuaman are not merely stacked, they are woven together. Some of these granite blocks weigh more than 100 tons, the equivalent of a full-grown blue whale, yet they fit against one another with a seam so flawless you cannot force a razor blade between them. The builders accomplished this without mortar, without iron chisels, and without the wheel. Their secret was a technique known as ashlar masonry, a patient, almost unimaginable process of shaping each stone to interlock perfectly with its neighbors. It was a three-dimensional stone puzzle with no room for error. Experts believe they used harder stones as hammers, along with sand and water, to slowly grind the surfaces down through years of abrasion. But this theory only explains the how, not the why it works so perfectly. The true mystery lies in the final result, a wall composed of bizarre, irregular polygons that lock together in a way that modern engineering software would struggle to design. This chaotic-looking pattern is actually the source of its incredible strength. When the earth trembles and earthquakes shake the region, modern buildings with their rigid, uniform frames can crack and collapse. But the walls of Saxehuaman dance. The interlocking stones shift and settle during a quake, absorbing the tremendous energy, and then simply settle back into place when the shaking stops. They have done this for centuries. We can analyze this seismic stability, we can admire it, but we cannot economically reproduce it. The cost in time and labor to shape each unique stone by hand using their lost methods would be astronomical today. This was not merely construction, it was a conversation with the material itself. The Inca stonemasons understood the soul of the stone, a knowledge written not in books but in their hands and their eyes, a language that fell silent with the empire's collapse. What does it say that we can send a rover to Mars, yet we cannot rebuild a wall that has been standing in plain sight for 500 years? While the Incas mastered the earth, another group of builders sought to defy it entirely, reaching for the heavens with stone. Gothic cathedrals are not just buildings, they are stone skeletons stretched to their absolute limit. Their most revolutionary feature is not the spire or the rose window, but the flying buttress, the graceful stone arm that reaches out from the walls to the ground. This external skeleton was the only thing preventing the entire structure from collapsing under its own ambition. The walls, now freed from their load-bearing duty, could become impossibly thin, filled with vast mosaics of stained glass that flooded the interior with colored light. The master masons who conceived this were working centuries before the formal science of engineering existed. They had no calculus to calculate load distribution, no computers to model stress. Their understanding of physics was purely empirical, built from a slow accumulation of observed successes and catastrophic failures passed down through generations. Their tools were geometry, full-scale templates laid out on special tracing floors, and rules of thumb guarded as fiercely as state secrets within their mason lodges. Modern structural analysis reveals something astonishing about these cathedrals. They are not overbuilt. In many cases, the stonework is perfectly optimized, with margins of safety so slim that they border on the reckless. This indicates an almost supernatural intuitive grasp of how forces move through stone. We can build taller today, of course, but we do it with steel frames and digital modeling. To replicate the delicate stone lacework of a Gothic cathedral using only medieval techniques and materials is a challenge we have essentially surrendered. The guild's secrets for calculating the precise angle of a buttress, for carving a keystone that locks an entire vault in perfect balance, for knowing just how much to stretch the stone before it snaps, died with the lodges. These soaring monuments are a testament to an empirical science of touch and intuition, a language of force and form that we have since replaced with code. We can admire the result, but the deep, hands-on wisdom that built it has vanished from the world. But the stone itself is only half the story. Behind every impossible wall and every gravity-defying arch lies a hidden language of numbers. The vanished builders were not just master craftsmen, they were philosophers of geometry, working with mathematical principles that were either never written down or were part of a secret, esoteric tradition. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is a mountain of stone built with a precision that still stuns surveyors. Its base is almost a perfect square, and the ratio of its perimeter to its height yields a close approximation of pi, a mathematical constant that would not be formally defined for thousands of years. Similarly, the proportions of its chambers and passages seem to echo the golden ratio, a number celebrated for its aesthetic harmony. For its builders, this was not a coincidence. It was intentional, a way of encoding cosmic truths into the very fabric of their work. This tradition of sacred geometry flowed through history, reaching its zenith in the great medieval cathedrals. For the master masons, a building's design was not just about structural integrity, it was a spiritual act. They used compass and straightedge to create layouts based on perfect squares, triangles, and circles, shapes they believed reflected the divine order of the universe. The height of a nave might relate to the width of its aisles through a series of harmonious ratios, all intended to create a space that felt not just grand but holy. This was math for meaning, a dimension almost entirely absent from our contemporary computer-aided design software. We can now measure these proportions with laser precision, but that is like knowing the notes of a symphony without understanding the emotion the composer was trying to convey. The loss of these conceptual frameworks means we can see the numbers, but we have lost the numerology. We can replicate the form, but we cannot resurrect the profound worldview that gave that form its purpose. This missing intellectual context is the true ghost in the machine, the silent partner in the vanished builder's craft. It separates a sterile, technical replication from a true, living understanding. So we are left with a haunting question: if we cannot think as they did, can we ever truly build as they did? Even our strongest modern concrete has a lifespan, a date with decay that we have engineered into its very nature. But in the heart of Rome, a dome has been patiently waiting for almost 2,000 years. The Pantheon's vast ceiling is not held up by steel. It is a single, monumental shell of Roman concrete, a material that behaves in a way ours simply cannot. While our concrete cracks and crumbles over decades, especially in seawater, Roman harbor walls submerged for 2 millennia have grown stronger. The difference is not just in what they used, but in how they used it. Their concrete was a living recipe, a mix of lime, volcanic ash known as pozzolana, and chunks of rock. When combined with water, this mixture starts a chemical reaction that never truly ends. Tiny plate-like crystals begin to grow within the matrix, locking the structure together and filling any microscopic cracks that form. A built-in self-repair system working on a scale we can barely perceive. We have the list of ingredients, yes, but we are missing the chef's instructions, the exact ratios, the order of mixing, the specific curing conditions. These were the guarded techniques of the Roman architect. Think of it like a master baker's sourdough. You can have the same flour, water, and salt, but without the precise timing, the temperature control, and the feel for the dough, the result is merely bread, not magic. Modern labs can create a close facsimile, but we have not unlocked the secret to its legendary endurance over centuries. Our concrete is designed to be static, a finished product. Theirs was designed to be a process, a material that continued to evolve and strengthen long after the builders had left the site. This is not a story of a lost ingredient, but of a lost relationship with the material world, a knowledge of how to make stone that lives and breathes. The silent libraries of the master builders were not collections of parchment, but generations of skilled hands. This entire system of knowledge lived and died with people, passed down through a tradition of apprenticeship that was more than mere training. It was a form of cultural memory. A young boy entering a mason's lodge would not simply be taught how to hold a chisel. He would spend a decade or more absorbing a complete sensory education. He learned to read the story written in a block of limestone, to identify the subtle flaws in its grain by the sound of a tap from a hammer. He was taught to feel the difference between stone that would hold a sharp edge and stone that would crumble, knowledge gained from hauling rocks from the quarry and watching the master select only the most perfect specimens. This was a wisdom of the hands, a tactile understanding of material that cannot be fully translated into words or diagrams. Then, in the 14th century, a catastrophe arrived that did not care about human knowledge. The Black Death swept across Europe, wiping out as much as half the population in a few terrible years. It did not distinguish between a lord and a laborer, but its impact on the tightly knit world of the crafts was uniquely devastating. Entire guilds were hollowed out. Masters and their carefully chosen apprentices died together, severing chains of instruction that had stretched back for centuries. When the rebuilding began, the deep, nuanced understanding of materials and methods was simply gone. The survivors had to reinvent, to simplify, and much of the old, refined wisdom was lost forever in the chaos. This was the great divorce between the hand and the mind. The rise of academic engineering brought incredible advances, of course, but it could not replicate the intuitive, embodied knowledge of the guilds. A textbook can teach you the physics of an arch, but it cannot teach your fingers to feel the precise moment a keystone locks into perfect balance. The vanished builders were the last keepers of a living language, a language spoken not with words but with stone and mortar. When they disappeared, they took the grammar of that language with them, leaving behind only the magnificent, silent poetry of their work. While the master masons spoke a silent language with stone, the ancient Greeks composed symphonies for the ear using architecture itself. High in the hills of the Peloponnese, the theater of Epidaurus presents an acoustic miracle that has baffled scientists for generations. In this vast, open-air bowl that seats 14,000 people, a single whisper uttered on the stage can travel with perfect clarity to the very last row, nearly 200 feet away. There are no speakers, no wires, no electronic trickery. The entire theater is the instrument. The secret lies in a combination of brilliant design choices that modern analysis can observe but not fully replicate. The stepped seating forms a precise, gentle curve, each row of limestone seats acting as a perfect acoustic filter. The porous stone does something remarkable. It absorbs the low-frequency rumble of the crowd, the wind, and distant noises, while simultaneously reflecting the high-frequency sounds of the human voice directly upward. This creates a natural sound system where the actor's words are isolated and carried on a cushion of air. We understand the physics of sound reflection, of course. We can use computer models to simulate the effect, but the true genius of the Greek architects was their algorithmic knowledge, a set of geometric and proportional rules they used to calculate the exact angle of every seat and the specific resonance of their local limestone. That formula, that step-by-step process for designing perfect acoustics from the ground up, has been erased. Building a new, large-scale theater today that achieves this same flawless, natural propagation is an elusive goal. We could approximate it with advanced digital modeling and synthetic materials, but to do so using only the tools and the intuitive mathematical understanding of the ancient Greeks is impossible. Theirs was a craft that treated sound as a physical material to be shaped and polished, a secret held by the original acoustic masters who understood that to truly move an audience, you must first reach them. The silent symphony of a Greek theater required a perfect understanding of the air itself, but other builders listened to the whispers of the earth and water. They possessed an environmental wisdom so deeply woven into daily life that it was never formally recorded, it was simply known. In the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, the people did not just build a city, they engineered a conversation with their river. They lived with a constant, predictable threat of seasonal floods, and their entire urban plan was a brilliant, unspoken response. Their streets were laid out in a precise grid, not for aesthetics but for hydraulic efficiency. Below the streets ran the world's first known, complex system of covered drains and sewers, all leading to the water, but their most ingenious adaptation was in the bricks. Every single brick used to build the city was meticulously fired to be water-resistant, a simple yet profound technological choice that ensured the buildings would survive the annual deluge. There were no instruction manuals left behind, no royal decrees about flood management etched in stone. This was a collective, practical intelligence passed from parent to child, from builder to apprentice, a lived understanding of how to coexist with a powerful, natural cycle. This place-based genius appeared in the dry, scorching heat of ancient Persia as well. There, architects turned the wind itself into a utility. they designed structures called wind catchers, tall, tower-like features that rose from the rooftops. These were not decorative. They were meticulously oriented to capture the slightest prevailing breeze, funneling it down into the heart of the building. The internal structure would then guide this air over cool water channels or into underground chambers, creating a natural and completely passive air conditioning system that refreshed entire homes without a single watt of electricity. This was not a secret held by one genius, but a widespread architectural language born from centuries of watching the wind patterns, of feeling the sun's angle, of understanding the local climate on an intimate, sensory level. When these cultures eventually transformed, when empires fell and populations shifted, this localized knowledge did not get archived in a library. It simply evaporated. The people who held the deep, empirical reasons for orienting a wind catcher exactly 15 degrees off true north, or for mixing a specific clay into bricks for maximum water resistance, were gone. We are left with the archaeological remains, marvels of adaptation that we can study but cannot truly inhabit with the same intuitive understanding. We now try to build sustainably with complex technology and energy-intensive systems, struggling to achieve what they accomplished with simple, elegant design rooted in a forgotten connection to their world. Their vanished wisdom poses a quiet challenge to our modern approach. How can we hope to live in balance with the planet when we have forgotten how to listen to it? 5,000 years ago, on the edge of a windswept Scottish island, a community built a village to last. Skara Brae is not a fortress or a temple, but a collection of homes, and its survival is in many ways more miraculous than the grandest pyramid. While the Romans were perfecting their concrete 2,500 years in the future, these Neolithic builders were masterfully stacking stones, creating an entire settlement without a single drop of mortar. They had no metal tools, only implements of stone, bone, and antler. Yet they constructed houses complete with stone beds, central hearths, stone dressers, and even waterproof storage tanks, all nestled within protective earth walls. Theirs was a genius of necessity, a profound understanding of how to use the landscape itself as both a quarry and a shield. They selected specific flat stones known as tilly flagstones, a material that lay naturally in the local bedrock. The secret was not just in stacking, but in the careful selection and placement of each stone. They knew instinctively which stones would bear the most weight, which shapes would interlock to create a stable, shifting whole, and how to angle the walls slightly inward to distribute the immense pressure from above. The greatest mystery, however, hangs over the roofs. We can see the foundations and the walls, but the method for creating a secure, draft-proof, and waterproof roof from these same flat stones is a complete enigma. Did they use layers of turf and skin, or did they devise a corbelled stone ceiling that has long since collapsed? The answer vanished with them. Modern dry stone wallers can build beautiful, sturdy fences, but to replicate an entire, complex, and comfortable village using only the tools and knowledge available in 3200 BC is an almost insurmountable challenge. It would require us to unlearn centuries of construction and rediscover a foundational wisdom, a tactile conversation with stone that we have long since forgotten. These were not primitive huts, they were sophisticated, insulated homes that provided warmth and shelter for generations against the brutal North Atlantic gales. Their enduring comfort stands as a quiet testament to a type of intelligence that is not measured by technology, but by a deep, symbiotic harmony with the materials at hand. This culture of secrecy was a double-edged sword. In the shadowy world of the medieval Mason's Lodge, knowledge was not a public good to be shared, but a private treasure to be hoarded. Guilds operated like closed corporations, and their most powerful assets were the techniques they refused to write down. A master might teach his apprentice how to carve a simple column base, but the mathematical formula for determining the perfect curve of a vault rib, the one that would distribute the weight of the entire roof, was reserved for the final stages of a decades-long initiation. They communicated in a language of coded gestures, secret handshakes, and symbols carved in hidden places. The mark a mason left on a finished stone was his signature, but the geometric diagrams scratched on a tracing floor were his classified blueprints. This system ensured quality control and guaranteed the guild's monopoly on high-level work. It created a protected space for genius to flourish, but it built a library with only one copy. The knowledge was not stored in a building, it was stored in a few human minds. A single outbreak of plague in a city, a guild's exile by a suspicious king, or the sudden economic shift that made their specialized craft unprofitable could act as a fire in that lone library, burning every book to ashes. Consider the intricate fan vaulting of an English cathedral, a stone web so delicate it looks like frozen lace. The method for setting out such a vault was a pinnacle of the mason's art, a three-dimensional puzzle solved with ropes, templates, and complex geometrical operations. When the demand for such grandiose stone buildings faded with the Reformation and the Renaissance, the guilds that specialized in this work slowly disbanded. The masters died and their apprentices, if they had any, moved on to other trades. The living chain of instruction was broken. The specific, hands-on process for creating that stunning architectural effect simply ceased to exist. We can study the vaults today, we can laser scan them and create digital models, but the intimate, step-by-step craft knowledge, the tricks for transferring a full-scale design onto a tracing floor or for propping the stones safely during construction, died with its last practitioners. The guild's greatest strength, their secrecy, became their final and most permanent vanishing act. Yet the most profound vanishing act may be the one that happened entirely out of sight, hidden beneath the very ground people walked upon. Deep in the heart of Turkey's Cappadocia region, an entire civilization chose to build downward, not upward. They were not stacking stones, but carving directly into the soft, malleable volcanic rock, creating multi-level subterranean cities like Derinkuyu that could shelter as many as 20,000 people. This was not a crude network of caves. It was a meticulously planned underground metropolis, a vertical fortress descending as many as 18 stories into the earth. The builders engineered a self-contained world with everything needed for long-term survival, from stables for livestock and intricate wine presses to dedicated churches and countless living quarters. They solved the fundamental problems of underground life with breathtaking ingenuity. Deep ventilation shafts, some stretching over 100 feet to the surface, provided a constant supply of fresh air to even the lowest levels. Secret wells tapped into underground water sources, ensuring a secure supply even during a siege. And for defense, they carved massive, circular stone doors, each weighing several hundred pounds. These could be rolled across key passageways from the inside, effectively sealing entire sections of the city like a stone vault. The engineering knowledge required for such an undertaking is almost beyond comprehension. To carve out such vast, multi-story caverns without causing a catastrophic collapse demanded an intuitive, almost spiritual understanding of the rock's integrity. These vanished builders knew, by feel and by experience, exactly how much rock they could remove, where to leave supporting pillars, and how to distribute the immense weight of the earth above. They worked without steel reinforcement, without concrete, and without the detailed geological surveys that guide our modern tunnel boring machines. Their technique was a lost art of listening to the stone, of reading its subtle weaknesses and strengths. We can dig bigger tunnels today, but we do so with immense mechanical power and a safety net of technology. the builders of Derinkuyu possessed a different kind of genius, a patient, tactile wisdom that turned the earth itself into a home. They did not conquer the landscape, they collaborated with it, creating a sanctuary that has remained structurally sound for centuries. This raises a haunting thought about the nature of safety and community. In an age of digital networks and surface-level connections, what have we lost of that deep, communal instinct to literally carve out a shared refuge, a place of last resort built not with borrowed technology, but with inherited, hands-on wisdom? A building project for these cultures was a spiritual conversation with the universe. The physical structure was only the final, visible manifestation of a process steeped in ritual, prayer, and a profound belief that the building itself was a living entity. The precise orientation of a temple was not a matter of aesthetics. It was a sacred alignment, a way of plugging the human world directly into the cosmic order. The Maya did not simply build pyramids, they wove them into the fabric of time and space. Their structures at places like Chichen Itza were meticulously aligned with the movements of the sun, the moon, and Venus. On the spring equinox, the play of light and shadow on the main pyramid creates the illusion of a serpent slithering down the staircase, a direct manifestation of the feathered serpent god Kukulkan. For the builders, this was not a clever optical illusion. It was divine confirmation that their work was correct, that the pyramid was now an active participant in the celestial cycle. The motivation for such flawless precision was not just architectural pride. It was a religious imperative, a collective act of devotion that drove the entire society. We can use advanced software to calculate these same alignments with perfect accuracy. We can rebuild the pyramid to the exact same dimensions, but we cannot replicate the cultural engine that powered its creation. The fervent belief that the gods themselves were watching, that the stability of the world depended on the building's correct placement, this is the intangible ingredient that is forever lost to us. The stones of Chichen Itza, in their silent perfection, are like the notes of a symphony composed in a language we no longer speak. We can play the notes, but the music, the emotional and spiritual resonance that gave the symphony its soul, has faded into silence. This is the ultimate ghost in the machine, the missing context that separates a sterile replica from a living, breathing monument. It forces us to ask a deeply unsettling question. Can a building truly be the same if the prayers that built it have been forgotten? Out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, a different kind of stone whispers its own story of loss. The ancient coral brick mosques of the Maldives, like the Hukuru Mosque, are monuments built from a living reef. The vanished builders here did not quarry stone from a mountain, they harvested it from the sea using a material called Porite's coral. This was not a simple act of collection, it was a delicate, timed process that began entirely underwater. Divers would carefully cut the porous coral into massive blocks while they were still submerged, a crucial first step that modern builders have struggled to comprehend. Why underwater? Because once the coral is exposed to the air, a chemical transformation begins. The blocks begin to cure, hardening from a living organism into a durable, stone-like building material over time. This was not just architecture, it was a form of alchemy, turning the sea's own bounty into sacred spaces. The true genius, however, lay in the details we can no longer see. The builders possessed an intimate, generational knowledge of the reefs, knowing exactly which corals to harvest and when, in a rhythm that sustained the ecosystem even as they built from it. They understood the precise window of time between cutting the block and its exposure to air, a timing that affected the final strength and workability of the brick. And after the walls were raised, they performed another miracle, carving the hardened coral into the most breathtakingly intricate lacquer work and delicate stone filigree, patterns so fine they look like frozen lace. Today, these mosques are crumbling and our best conservation efforts often fall short. We have the buildings and we know they are made of coral, but we are missing the entire oral instruction manual. We do not know the sustainable harvesting cycles, the exact feel of the coral at the perfect moment for carving, or the secrets to cutting it underwater with primitive tools. The method was a perfect, localized symbiosis between people and place, a language spoken between divers and the deep, and when that conversation ended, the knowledge turned to sea foam and vanished. The tools themselves were often simple, but the hands that wielded them were anything but. Consider the Egyptian stonemason tasked with shaping a block of granite, a stone so hard it can blunt a modern steel chisel. His tools were copper saws and drills, stone pounders, and bags of sand. On the surface, this seems like a hopeless mismatch, like trying to carve a diamond with a butter knife. Yet the results are some of the most precisely cut stones in history. The secret was not in the tool's material, but in the artist's deep, intuitive knowledge of the material he was working with. This was a mastery of process, not just of objects. They understood that granite, when heated by a controlled fire and then rapidly cooled with water, would fracture along predictable lines through thermal shock. They knew that a copper saw, though soft, could become an effective cutting instrument when dragged back and forth through a groove filled with wet sand. The sand, an abrasive harder than the copper, did the actual cutting, while the saw was merely the delivery system. This was not brute force, it was a kind of material jujitsu, using a material's own properties against it. The skill lay in knowing exactly how much heat to apply, how much water to use, and the precise angle and rhythm of the sawing motion. This is a knowledge that lives in the muscles and the senses, a feel for the work that is developed over a lifetime of practice. We have the same basic tools today, but we lack the generations of accumulated tactile wisdom. It is the difference between a novice holding a surgeon's scalpel and a master surgeon performing a delicate operation. The tool is identical, but the understanding of how to apply it, the anticipation of its effect on the living tissue, is worlds apart. That profound, embodied expertise is the first thing to evaporate when a craft tradition is broken, leaving us with the physical artifacts but none of the genius required to use them properly. While we build ever higher, some of the most profound architectural conversations happened in the act of digging down. In the dry plains of Western India, the Nuraghe Vav is not a structure that reaches for the sky, but one that descends into the earth, an inverted temple carved into the very ground. This stepwell is a breathtaking reversal of a cathedral, a 7-story deep staircase leading not to a spire, but to a sacred pool of water far below the surface. Its form is a complex geometric masterpiece of stairs, pavilions, and tunnels, all arranged with a precision that served a single, vital purpose: to manage the precious resource of water through the brutal cycles of drought and monsoon. The architects who conceived this were far more than builders. They were master hydrogeologists centuries before the term existed. They possessed an intimate, generational understanding of the underground water tables, knowing exactly how deep to dig to find the most reliable source. They designed the stepwell structure to withstand the immense and changing pressures of the water itself. During the dry season, the receding water would expose more of the ornate staircase, while the monsoon's rise would slowly submerge the lower levels, all without causing the delicate, sculpted walls to collapse from erosion or the shifting earth. This was a living, breathing system, an architectural lung that expanded and contracted with the seasons. Modern civil engineering can certainly drill deeper wells and build larger dams, but this holistic fusion of art, community space, and sophisticated water management is a lost art. The Nuraghe Vav is covered in over 500 major sculptures, turning the descent for water into a spiritual journey. The builder's genius was not just in their stonework, but in their empirical, place-based knowledge, a deep map of the local hydrology written in the memory of the community and passed down through countless dry seasons and monsoons. That specific, localized wisdom, the knowing of exactly which aquifer to tap and how the earth would respond, died with the society that nurtured it. We are left with the magnificent shell, an empty vessel whose most vital ingredient, the living knowledge of the water itself, has long since evaporated. A master builder's genius meant nothing without the right stone, the perfect sand, or a specific shade of glass. The most brilliant architectural designs were utterly dependent on a hidden world of logistics, a sprawling network of specialized suppliers whose work has long since faded into obscurity. The Roman Empire did not just build with concrete, it built with a specific volcanic ash known as pozzolana, a material found in only a few key locations across Italy. To construct ports, aqueducts, and the Pantheon's dome, the Romans engineered a supply chain of staggering scale, moving this magical sand by the shipload across the Mediterranean. This was not a simple delivery service, it was the circulatory system of an empire, a carefully managed flow of a critical resource that made their architectural miracles possible. When that empire fractured, the roads fell into disrepair, the shipping lanes grew dangerous, and the organized system for quarrying, transporting, and distributing pozzolana simply dissolved. The knowledge of the concrete recipe remained, written in a few texts, but the ability to execute it on a grand scale vanished overnight because the raw material was now out of reach. The builders were left with a set of instructions for a meal they could no longer cook, because the most vital ingredient had been taken off the market. This same story played out centuries later in the glow of a medieval cathedral's stained glass windows. The deep, luminous royal blue that bathes the interior of Chartres in a celestial light was not a happy accident. It was the product of a precise and secretive art, a formula known only to a handful of glassmakers who sourced their cobalt from a specific cluster of mines in Saxony. The glassmaker was as much a chemist as an artist, knowing exactly how much of this rare mineral to add to the molten glass, at what temperature, and for how long to achieve that singular, transcendent hue. That color was not just pigment, it was a destination, the end point of a fragile economic chain that stretched from a German mine to a merchant caravan to a master's workshop in a French town. When the Gothic era waned and the demand for such extravagant colored glass diminished, the market for that specific cobalt collapsed. The mines shifted their focus. The glassmakers who held the secret formulas passed away without apprentices, and the recipe for that particular blue evaporated from the world. You could gather all the cobalt on Earth today, but without that lost recipe, you could never recreate the exact color that fills the nave of Chartres. This is the ghost in the machine of history, the silent collapse of the ecosystems that made genius possible. It forces us to ask a difficult question about our own civilization. What seemingly mundane supply chains, what invisible networks of material and skill are our own architectural wonders silently depending on, and how easily could they too vanish? A pagoda in Japan sways gently in an earthquake, dancing with the tremors rather than fighting them. This is the 5-story pagoda at Hydrogeological, a wooden tower that has stood for 14 centuries in a land racked by some of the most powerful quakes on the planet. Its survival is no accident. It is the result of a radical architectural philosophy that treats flexibility as the ultimate strength. The genius of these structures lies in a central pillar known as the shinbashira, a massive wooden column that runs up the core of the building. But this is not a rigid spine holding everything up. In many pagodas, it is actually suspended from the top, hanging loosely like a giant pendulum. When the ground begins to shake, the floors of the pagoda can sway independently, almost like a stack of loose trays. The suspended Shinbashira then swings in the opposite direction, its immense weight acting as a counterbalance that absorbs and dissipates the destructive energy of the quake. This is not modern engineering. It is a 1400-year-old solution to a problem we are still grappling with today. The builders achieved this with an almost magical system of interlocking wooden brackets, a complex three-dimensional puzzle known as the Mokuzo technique. They used no nails, no metal fasteners of any kind. Instead, they relied on hundreds of individually carved joints that slot together with absolute precision. These joints are not tight and rigid. They are designed with a tiny amount of give, allowing the entire structure to flex and move as a single organic unit. The knowledge required to build this way was encoded in a system of sacred geometry and proportion called kiweri. This was the master carpenter's secret formula, a set of ratios that dictated every dimension of the building based on the initial size of the pillars. It was a complete design language that ensured structural harmony and resilience, but the true mastery went beyond mathematics. It was in the selection of the wood itself. The master carpenter knew which trees to harvest from which side of the mountain, how long to season the timber, and how to read its grain to place each piece in perfect alignment with the forces it would bear. This was a living knowledge passed down through generations of a single family or a close-knit guild. Modern engineers, with their shock absorbers and base isolators, have only recently begun to replicate the pagoda's passive damping system. But they are working with computer models and standardized materials. The original builders worked with an intuitive, almost spiritual connection to their wood, a sensory understanding of its life and spirit. That deep, embodied conversation between the carpenter, his chisel, and the living tree is a language that has almost entirely vanished from the world, leaving behind these silent, swaying giants as a testament to a wisdom we can only hope to partially reclaim. Reverse engineering a silent monument is like trying to decode a symphony by listening to a single, perfect recording. We can hear the music, but we have no access to the composer's notes, the conductor's interpretation, or the countless rehearsals that shaped the final performance. Our modern tools are incredibly powerful. We can use ground-penetrating radar to see inside walls, laser scanners to create millimeter-perfect digital models, and chemical analysis to break a material down to its atomic structure. These methods tell us what the builders used and how they assembled it. They give us the ingredients list, but they cannot tell us why they chose those specific ingredients, or the series of failed experiments that led to that perfect final recipe. This is the ghost in the machine. The true genius was not in the stone itself, but in the thousands of invisible decisions made before the first stone was ever laid. A medieval master mason did not have a single, fixed blueprint. His design was a living thing, adapted on the fly as the building rose from the ground. He might have stood on the tracing floor, redrawing a window arch by a hand's breadth because the morning light felt wrong. He might have added an extra inch to a buttress's thickness after watching how the winter frost settled on the foundation. These subtle sensory judgments, these acts of creative problem-solving in response to the real world, are the very essence of the craft, and they leave no fossil record. We are left with the magnificent answer, but the long and winding road of thought that led to it is forever lost. This is why our most accurate reconstructions can feel sterile. We can replicate the form with perfect precision, but we cannot replicate the fluid, intuitive thinking that gave that form its life and its soul. The building stands before us, a perfect sentence in a language whose grammar we have forgotten. Deep beneath the rolling hills of central Italy, the Etruscans were solving a fundamental problem of architecture, one heavy stone at a time. While history often credits the Romans with perfecting the arch, it was this mysterious, earlier civilization that first mastered the art of turning a doorway into a monument and a tomb into an eternal shelter. Their gateways, like the Porta Augusta in Perugia, are not just openings in a wall, they are statements of power and knowledge, built with massive, precisely fitted stones that form a true arch, a structure that channels weight outward and down into the ground. But the Etruscans also employed an even older, more mysterious technique known as the Corbeled vault. This was not a true arch with a central keystone, but a feat of patient balancing, where each horizontal layer of stone was cantilevered slightly inward until the gap at the top could be sealed with a single capstone. It looks like a child carefully stacking books to form a tunnel, but executed on a monumental scale with stones weighing tons. The precision required for this method is almost beyond belief, a testament to a deep, intuitive, and likely formalized understanding of how compressive forces move through stone. They built these architectural marvels primarily for their cities of the dead, vast necropolises that served as subterranean copies of their world above. Here in the silent dark, their vaults have held for millennia. The tragedy is that we can see the magnificent result, but the Etruscan language remains largely a secret to us. Only a few fragments of their writing have been deciphered. Any architectural treatises they possessed, any formal guides to their calculations and rules of thumb, are locked away in a script we cannot read. The Romans, who eventually conquered and absorbed the Etruscans, were brilliant adapters. They saw the power of the arch and the vault and took these concepts, refining them with concrete and building them on an imperial scale. But in doing so, they effectively erased the original inventors. We are left with the refined Roman version, a brilliant but secondary copy, while the initial spark of Etruscan genius, the first principles and the failed experiments that led to that first perfect arch, are lost in the shadows. This is a recurring ghost in the story of human innovation. The precursor knowledge that makes the great leap possible is often the most fragile, the first to vanish, leaving history to remember only the final, polished product of a chain of thought whose first links have long since turned to dust. The line between a forgotten technique and a supernatural legend is often vanishingly thin. When a society loses the knowledge of how a thing was made, the memory of the builder begins to transform, their skill magnified by the mists of time until it appears to be magic. Consider the Cyclopean walls of Mycenaean Greece, built from limestone boulders so immense that later Greeks, who could not conceive of their construction, declared them the work of one-eyed giants, the Cyclopes. The myth provided a satisfying explanation for the impossible, but it also contains a hidden truth. The real builders were not giants, but they did possess a method for quarrying, moving, and fitting multi-ton stones that was so effective it became invisible, leaving only the miraculous result. The legend is an echo of their reputation, a cultural acknowledgement that their skill was so far beyond the ordinary that it had to be the work of another race entirely. We see the same pattern in the story of Daedalus, the legendary craftsman who built the labyrinth, a maze so cunning and complex that no one who entered could find their way out. This is not just a tale of a monster and a hero. It is likely a folk memory of an actual architectural genius, a man or a school of builders who pioneered revolutionary techniques for designing vast, intricate structures that defied conventional spatial understanding. His name became a synonym for ingenuity itself, but the specific principles of his design were lost, absorbed into the myth. For historians, this presents a profound challenge. How do you separate the practical engineering manual from the epic poem? These stories are not merely falsehoods, they are the fingerprints of a lost reality, the only remaining testament to a skill set that so dazzled its contemporaries that it could only be explained as divine or monstrous. The danger is that by wrapping these achievable methods in a shroud of supernatural wonder, the myths unintentionally helped to bury them deeper. They taught people to marvel at the result, not to understand the process, to accept the miracle rather than to seek the method. The true task for us today is to listen carefully to these ancient whispers, to look past the giants and the gods, and to search for the human hands that once held the tools, the minds that solved problems we are still struggling to comprehend. High in the Norwegian fjords, a wooden church stands as a silent ship, its dragon-headed gables snarling at the rain. This is the Borgund Stave Church, a structure that seems to breathe with the forest itself. Its construction is a masterclass in wooden engineering, a sophisticated evolution of the Viking longhall adapted for a sacred purpose. Instead of using a traditional frame, the builders employed massive vertical posts known as staves, sunk deep into the earth. These were connected by a complex lattice of beams and braces using only intricate woodworking joints, a puzzle locked together without a single nail. The result is a structure of incredible resilience, designed to flex and shift with the freezing winters and powerful mountain winds, settling and groaning like the hull of a great ship. The true genius, however, lay in the preparation. The master carpenters possessed a secret, alchemical knowledge of wood preservation. They would often char the base of the posts or set them on a foundation of stone, creating a barrier against ground moisture. Some theories suggest they treated the timber with tar or other natural substances, a recipe for longevity that has been lost. This was not just carpentry, it was a profound dialogue with a living material. The churches themselves are a visual fusion of two worlds, their tiered roofs rising like a series of shields, and their dragon head carvings a direct echo of Viking ship prows. This was a deliberate, symbolic integration, a way for a society to build its new Christian identity using the powerful visual language of its pagan past. The men who held this complete knowledge, from the symbolic carving to the secret joinery that allowed for movement, were a specific, revered class of artisans. When the age of building these wooden marvels passed, supplanted by new styles and materials, their unique tradition died with them. The surviving stave churches are now precious relics, incredibly difficult to conserve because we lack the full, living instruction manual for the wood itself. To build one from scratch today would require not just wood and tools, but the resurrection of an entire school of thought, a sensory understanding of timber that allowed these carpenters to turn trees into a prayer that has lasted 1,000 years. That same master mason, holding his secret geometry, could not have worked without a society willing to wait. His genius was not a solitary spark, but a flame fed by a very specific kind of fuel, an economic and social engine that has long since run out. Consider the sheer scale of commitment required. A pharaoh could mobilize tens of thousands of workers for decades, diverting the entire surplus of an agricultural kingdom toward a single, silent mountain of stone. A medieval bishop would dedicate the financial resources of his entire diocese to a cathedral project that he knew would not be finished in his lifetime, nor in his successors. This was not a matter of simple wealth, it was a societal choice to invest in the eternal. These long-time horizons were the true incubators of genius. A building site became a kind of open-air university, a place where a young apprentice could learn from an old master, and that apprentice, decades later as the new master, could refine those techniques and pass them on to another. This slow, generational accumulation of knowledge allowed for a profound kind of research and development. They could afford to make small mistakes, to try a slightly different arch shape, to experiment with a new mortar mix, and to observe the results over years. The entire craft evolved through this patient, multi-generational conversation with the materials. Our modern world operates on a completely different clock. Construction today is governed by budgets, quarterly reports, and tight deadlines. The primary goal is efficiency and return on investment, a philosophy that leaves little room for the slow, artisanal, and experimental methods that produce the Pantheon or the great cathedrals. We have optimized our process for speed and cost, but in doing so, we have effectively dismantled the very environment that allowed master builders to flourish. They were not just individuals of immense talent, they were the products of a world that valued monumentality and permanence above all else, a world willing to pour generations of labor and treasure into a single, enduring statement. We have lost more than their names and their techniques. We have lost the economic patience and the collective will that made their work possible in the first place. This forces us to confront a difficult reality. Could a master builder even exist in our world today, or have we designed an economy that makes their particular form of genius obsolete? Scattered across the Sardinian landscape stand silent stone sentinels, the Nuraghe. These are not simple stone piles, but complex, conical fortress towers built by a Bronze Age civilization that left no written language behind. Constructed from massive blocks of dark basalt, fitted together without a speck of mortar, they form the only architectural tradition of its kind in the world. The most elaborate, like Nuraghe, are not single towers but entire fortified villages, with a central keep towering over a labyrinth of interconnected bastions, courtyards, and smaller towers, a stone maze designed for a purpose we can only guess. The true mystery lies not in their grand scale, but in the basic, unanswered questions. How did the Nuraghic people, with Bronze Age technology, quarry these gigantic stones from the volcanic hills? How did they transport them, some weighing many tons, across the rugged terrain without the wheel? And most baffling of all, how did they lift and precisely stack these blocks to form the corbelled domes that cap the towers, a technique where each successive layer of stone cantilevers slightly inward until the ceiling is sealed at the top? This method creates a stable, soaring interior space, a testament to an intuitive understanding of weight and counterbalance that feels impossibly advanced for its time. Unlike the Egyptians, who left us hieroglyphs and tomb paintings that at least hint at their methods, the Nuraghic builders left nothing. Their entire civilization, its beliefs, its social structure, and its daily life is an archaeological ghost. We have their breathtaking structures, but we have no contemporary records, no clear cultural descendants to pass down oral histories, not even a definitive explanation for why they built these 7,000 stone giants across their island. They rose, they built, and then they seemingly vanished, taking the master key to their architectural genius with them. The Nuraghe stand as a profound reminder that an entire library of human knowledge can be contained within a craft, and when the craftsmen disappear, that library closes its doors forever. That deep, intuitive wisdom was a language spoken directly to the materials themselves. A master builder did not need to calculate the tensile strength of a specific piece of limestone because his hands already knew its story. He had spent a lifetime feeling how it responded to a chisel, watching how it weathered in the rain, and learning which quarry produced the most reliable blocks. This was knowledge written in the muscles and the senses, a living library of cause and effect built from generations of trial and error. They knew that a specific arch shape worked because they had seen it work, or because their master, who had learned from his master, had shown them the subtle curve that would channel the weight perfectly. This empirical approach was rooted in the particular, the local, and the immediate. It was a science of context where the unique personality of the stone or the timber was the most important variable in the equation. Modern engineering, by its very nature, operates from the opposite direction. It is built upon theoretical science, the universal laws of physics and mathematics that apply everywhere, regardless of the specific block of granite in front of you. We can model a cathedral spire on a computer, calculating every stress point and load distribution with astonishing accuracy long before the foundation is dug. This theoretical power allows us to build structures of impossible height and complexity, achieving feats the ancients could never have dreamed of. But this universal approach has a blind spot. It struggles to capture the nuanced, context-dependent tricks of the trade that were the empirical builder's secret weapon. Our equations can tell us the general strength of Roman concrete, but they cannot tell us the precise feel of the pozzolana ash from that specific Italian volcano, or the exact rhythm of mixing that produced a self-healing chemistry. We can design an earthquake-resistant building, but we cannot replicate the Japanese master carpenter's innate sense for which tree, from which side of the mountain, had the perfect grain to become a pagoda's swaying heart pillar. This is the philosophical gap that separates us from their genius. Our knowledge is broad and powerful, but theirs was deep and intimate. We seek to conquer materials with universal laws, while they sought to collaborate with them through a lifetime of careful observation. This is why we can build taller and stronger, yet we look upon their enduring, resilient creations not with superiority, but with a humbling sense of awe. They achieved a kind of resilience that feels almost organic, a harmony with the natural world that our most advanced calculations are still struggling to fully comprehend. Long before the first stone of the Great Pyramid was laid, another civilization was wrestling with giants. On the sun-scorched island of Gozo, the Gewith, above Gantaja temples rise from the earth, a sprawling complex of stone so ancient it makes the pharaohs seem like recent history. These are the world's oldest freestanding stone structures, built by a people who vanished so completely we do not even know their name. They left behind no cities, no writings, no kings. All that remains is their impossible work, a collection of temples constructed from colossal limestone blocks, some weighing more than 50 tons. The scale of their ambition is staggering, a project that would have required a society organized with military precision. How did they muster the labor, feed the workers, and maintain the collective will to haul these megaliths into place, not for a year, but for generations? The logistics alone are a ghost, a silent testament to a social order we cannot reconstruct. The physical method, however, leaves a few more clues. Archaeologists believe they used massive spherical stone balls as rollers, levering the blocks onto these primitive bearings and inching them forward along timber tracks. They likely constructed great earthen ramps, heaping soil and stone to raise the monoliths into their final, perfect positions. But this theory only explains the brute mechanics, not the finesse. How did they achieve such precise alignments without a written language for mathematics? How did they shape the stones so perfectly with only tools of flint and obsidian? The true engine behind Gewith above Gantaja was not just engineering but faith. The temples are believed to be dedicated to a mother goddess, a symbol of fertility and life. This spiritual impetus was the fuel that powered the entire, decades-long endeavor. It was a belief so powerful it could move literal mountains. Then, around 2,500 years before the Common Era, this civilization simply faded away. A changing climate, exhausted resources, or perhaps an internal collapse severed the thread of their knowledge forever. They disappeared before the Bronze Age, leaving their silent stone circles as the only chapter of their story. The Gewith above Gantaja temples are the ultimate symbol of the vanished builder. They stand as a breathtaking achievement from the deep mists of prehistory, a permanent question mark challenging our most basic assumptions about what early human societies were capable of. and a humbling reminder that the greatest structures can be built by those whose very names are lost to time. The silent stones of Ji, with dot above Gantaja and the swaying pagodas of Japan, are not isolated mysteries. They are individual notes in a single, haunting symphony of loss. From the Inca stonemasons who felt the soul of a granite block to the medieval guilds that guarded their geometric secrets, the vanished builder phenomenon reveals a universal truth. It is not merely a lost recipe for concrete or a forgotten technique for fitting stones. What disappeared was the entire ecosystem that made such genius possible. A rich soil composed of lifelong apprenticeships, secretive guilds, unrecorded environmental wisdom, and a society willing to invest across generations. We have lost the living network, not just the nodes. Our modern world has traded that deep, tactile, and localized knowledge for something incredibly powerful yet strangely fragile: a digital and globalized intelligence. We store our architectural blueprints in the cloud and our research on servers, believing this makes our knowledge permanent. But this creates a new kind of vulnerability. What happens if the complex economic and technological chains that support our digital civilization are ever severed? The specialized knowledge to build a microchip or maintain a global network is not held in the hands of a village. It is concentrated in a fragile web of interdependent experts and industries. The legacy of the vanished builders is a permanent lecture on the impermanence of human know-how, forcing us to look at our own world with a new and unsettling question. As we design our own marvels with algorithms and artificial intelligence, what essential wisdom are we failing to pass on? What profound, hands-on understanding of our world and our materials are we allowing to quietly slip away, leaving behind only the magnificent, unreadable shell of our own ambition? These silent structures are not just relics of the past, they are permanent questions carved in stone. Every self-healing wall and every swaying pagoda is a testament to a simple, humbling truth: human knowledge is not a ladder we are always climbing. It is a library that can burn, a story whose most brilliant chapters can be torn out and lost forever. The vanished builders achieved a harmony with their materials that our most advanced technology struggles to match, not because we are less intelligent, but because we have lost the intimate, generational conversation they had with the world. They teach us that progress is not a one-way street. It is a fragile flame that can be extinguished by plague, by social collapse, or by the simple, quiet death of a craft without an apprentice. Look at the ancient wonders around you, not as tourist destinations, but as warnings and as inspirations. They challenge us to ask what essential skills and what profound understandings we are allowing to fade from our own world in the rush toward an automated future. What hands-on wisdom must we actively choose to protect and pass on, so that we do not become the next vanished builders, leaving behind only silent, unreadable monuments for a future that cannot understand them? If this journey into the depths of lost genius resonated with you, we would love to hear which of these ancient mysteries captivates you the most. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more explorations into the forgotten corners of our history.